Hi, this is Stephanie Adams here today with you for Beginning Counselor, Building Your Ideal Internship. And today's topic is when to fire your supervisor. What to do when it's best to let go. Now, here's the reason we have to address bad supervisory experiences. If you're not in a good supervisor relationship, you risk the quality of your training. It's very hard to focus on learning skills and clinical abilities when you're in fear of your supervisor or worried about being criticized, which then in turn affects your ability as a counselor because your training impacts your future career. Of course, your ability to understand what is needed of you at a job or how to succeed in private practice. This may be your first experience in the counseling field. And if your supervisor is an unhealthy person, they're not going to model the correct job relationship or private practice relationship, depending on your plans down the line. It can definitely affect your counselor's self-esteem. I know all of us start out a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure of ourselves, and we need encouragement to get through that. But if we don't have a supervisor that encourages us, we end up feeling low about our abilities, and we may even drop out down the line. Depending on when you take your tests in your training, as it differs from state to state, your supervisory relationship can even affect your test scores because they can be teaching you something that's not useful or appropriate to prepare you. Your supervisory relationship also affects your client outcomes. In a good supervisory relationship, they push you to challenge your clients and to try new things and to encourage them. In a negative one, you may be governed by fear of don't do this, it might not work out, or you might be a liability, you might be at risk, and then your clients suffer because they don't have a therapist that feels comfortable or safe. And eventually, even your license, because ultimately your supervisor is the one who helps determine that. They sign off on this and they may or may not put their name on it if the relationship hasn't been a positive and safe and healthy one. And let's talk about a little bit of what this could look like in real life. So an example of a bad supervisory relationship comes with Lisa. So Lisa accepted a job with the promise of having an on-site supervisor at her new work. Later on, she discovered there was just no one on staff able to do the job. As a result, she wasted a lot of time working for people under false pretenses. And so it took her that much longer to accomplish her required internship hours. That's an example of a supervisory relationship that actually wasn't even a relationship at all because she didn't get what she was promised. Jeremy encountered a domineering supervisor, and he was prevented from actually having the opportunity to do counseling. Instead, the supervisor overloaded him with case management or grunt work. Really, the supervisor just wanted an unpaid assistant rather than a counselor intern they were going to grow and nurture. So Jeremy paid the supervisor for over 6 months of supervision before he finally gave up on her continued promises to give him the counseling hours he needed after he had, quote, a little more experience. Julie was condemned in a performance review by her supervisor for feeling sad at the separation from her clients after a counseling termination. While it's certainly possible to overdo those emotions, the fact is that counseling is an emotional relationship on both sides. We have feelings about our clients. We enjoy it when they succeed, and sometimes we're going to be a little sad when we no longer get to see them anymore because they've succeeded in their counseling work. So this supervisor was, in essence, condemning Julie for a very normal reaction from a therapist. Anthony's supervisor was a no-show for their supervision meetings. And then when Anthony had to turn in his school forms, he was supposed to say that the supervisor was performing their duties even though the supervisor was not. So basically, Anthony was told to lie for his supervisor. Finally, Miranda was chastised for working with an agency client on a goal that was not in the treatment plan, even though it was well within the range of her capabilities and it was a goal the client desired to accomplish. So these are all examples of unhealthy or toxic supervisory relationships. And while I've tried to keep everyone's privacy by disguising some revealing details, each one of these stories I've been told have actually happened. And that just goes to show you that as much as we have this wonderful ideal that can work out great of a positive supervisory relationship, sometimes it really goes badly. If that's the case, how do you know? How do you know if you could be a Jeremy or a Miranda or someone else along those lines? Well, when your supervisor isn't a fit, you might feel some of these things. You might feel anxious or nervous whenever you see them. Maybe you get a sick feeling in your stomach before you go to a supervisory session. Maybe you worry frequently about letting them down. Like, oh my gosh, are they going to be disappointed in me? Are they going to criticize me? I hate it when they criticize me. Maybe you don't feel like you're learning anything from them. This isn't just like a boss and an employee. They aren't supposed to just give you tasks, but to help teach you and to give you teaching opportunities. If you don't feel like you're getting those and you're not learning, then that could be a bad supervisor fit. And you don't get opportunities to grow. Now, I think it's perfectly normal for supervisors to manage the opportunities that their interns have. They may monitor your client load and say, you know, this particular client type is a little bit too advanced for you. We will work towards that goal down the line, but we're not going to have you see them right now. That's normal, but you should be working towards something where you eventually get there, where you can see a clear path towards the future where you get to really stretch yourself. Finally, you might have a unsafe or an unfit supervisor relationship if you're doing more non-counseling work than counseling work. Now, depending on your job description, it may be part of the work, part of the whole point of the job you have is to do non-counseling work. And if that's the case, then you may be aware of that coming in. But if you were promised to do a certain percentage of counseling work and you're being held back, you're being directed towards case management or other opportunities that aren't helping you complete your hours, then think about that. Is that something that was more or less a bait and switch? Now, when you're thinking about all these things, be careful because sometimes you can have these symptoms for more than one different reason. For example, if you're really anxious before every supervisory session, is it really about the supervisor or are you the kind of person that has what I would call test anxiety? Meaning anytime you have to be in a position to be judged or graded, you get nervous. If that's the case, then that's something to deal with, but that's not necessarily the problem of the supervisory relationship. It may be a problem you have to address in yourself. Also, if you don't feel good about yourself, if you don't feel like you're growing, think about whether that is a component of the supervisor relationship or it's an issue of self-doubt or imposter syndrome. If you're dealing with this, there's an easy way to find out. We have a video on imposter syndrome. Check our YouTube channel and watch that and see if that might be the case for you. And it could also be a problem that's associated with the supervisor. Like maybe it's a part of the job that they're penned in by. Now that could still mean that you have to change the circumstance, leave the job or the agency, but it may need a slightly different approach when it's not a problem with the supervisor themselves. So carefully evaluate all that and find out, am I having a problem with the supervisor or is it something else? Because whatever it is, you want to focus on the right description of the problem so that you can have the right solution for you. So if it is your supervisor, if you determine after the reflection that your supervisor is the problem and you have to fire them, how do you do it? Well, I'm going to tell you today. First thing, start out by trying to talk to them. I know, I just said how to fire your supervisor, but sometimes we all have the challenge of dealing with this all internally, and the supervisor may not know what the issue is, and they may be willing to change if given the opportunity. So that's why I encourage you to start out by trying to talk to them. Just saying, hey, use I statements, use your counseling skills. Like, I'm seeing this as a problem. I'm worried about my opportunities here. Can you help me? Appeal to them as someone who could be your potential partner in resolving this issue rather than your enemy. You may choose for this the first step or for future steps to consider whether you need some support. Is it appropriate to bring in another intern in your group who may be having a similar issue and to gently discuss it with the supervisor as a team? You say, hey, we're both worried about this. Is it appropriate to consult another supervisor in the building, another equal to the supervisor, to help you talk through the issue? Now, this is obviously a very delicate situation because it could be something where it appears that you're going over their head. But that's why I said try talking directly to them first. I would not recommend appealing to someone else on their level or above them until they've completely ignored talking to them one-on-one. After that, after you've talked to them and potentially even brought in someone else on the supervisor's level to discuss it with them and or another intern, you have to weigh your options. I understand you might feel trapped at this point, but please understand you do have options. If you stay there, you can choose to stay there and choose how you're going to handle the challenges that you know are there. Or you can choose to move forward and find a more healthy long-term situation. Whatever you decide, I really want to encourage you to trust yourself. If you've gone through this process, if you've thought through all these different options, you've given it the appropriate amount of thought. So decide, make your decision, and don't look back. Give yourself the gift of not second guessing. Move forward with the next phase of your life, staying or going, and make it the best you possibly can. If you're trying to decide how to proceed with this difficult supervisory relationship, you don't have to do it alone. Let us help. Join our free Facebook group for mentorship and friendship and support at beginningcounselor.com. Just visit our website and click join to become a part of our group. Can't wait to see you there.